Love. Chantogananke, to place and hold in one's heart. The story of the cottonwoods. Cottonwood trees can be found along the rivers and creeks in Lakota country. They are tall and strong and live long lives. In midsummer, the breezes play with their leaves, rustling and rattling them, until they sing soft, joyful songs that everyone, four-leggeds, wingeds, crawlers, and two-leggeds, like to hear. Songs that can soothe a troubled mind, soften even the hardest heart, or heal a broken one. This is the story of two cottonwood trees who began their lives as something else. Many, many winters before the white man's steamboat brought the running face sickness, or smallpox, up the Great Muddy River and killed off almost 2,000 Lakota in the year 1837, two young people met at a summer gathering. She had just gone through her woman's ceremony, and he had counted his first victory against an enemy. She had beautiful dark eyes, and he was straight and tall. They couldn't keep their eyes off one another. Many evenings he stood with her in the soft folds of an elk-hide courting robe, just outside her family's lodge as her mother kept a watchful eye. Hidden beneath the robe, the young couple exchanged soft kisses and whispered promises, and at the dances, when the rabbit and round dance songs were sung, she would pull him into the dancing circle. They would dance side by side, moving together step for step, as if they were one person, their gentle voices blending in song with the softly pounding drums. Everyone could see that the hearts of these two young people were only for each other, and the old people marveled at how their two voices seemed to rise as one. It was only a matter of time, everyone was certain, before Whitelands would take a gift of horses to the family of Red Willow Woman to ask for her hand in marriage. The summer gathering ended, and the two young people reluctantly parted. Whitelands rode away with a promise that he would gather many horses. Summer passed, and autumn came. Red Willow Woman's village was encamped near Turtle Butte, while Whitelands' people were many days' ride to the north, near the White Earth River. He had ridden with several war parties against the Arikara and the Crow, and distinguished himself by fighting bravely. On one raid, he single-handedly captured 12 horses that, of course, were part of the bride price for Red Willow Woman's family. Leaves turned color and were falling when her village moved just north of the Sandhill country to hunt buffalo. It was there that Whitelands found them. He and two friends drove 18 horses into the encampment, but his soaring heart fell to earth like a wounded duck, his dreams crushed by Red Willow Woman's own words. With tears flowing, she told him she had been promised to a young man named Hecro. He was from a respected family, and she was honor-bound to do her father's bidding. Whitelands had never known such a feeling. The pain in his heart took his breath away, and he could not think clearly, and his very spirit seemed to curl up inside him like a lost child. Out of shame and confusion, he sent his friends away and rode aimlessly for several days and nights before he returned north. Back in his own village, he hid in his mother's lodge and would not eat for days. In the spring came word that Hecro and Red Willow Woman had been wed. When he heard that, Whitelands took his pain and frustration on a warpath against the Crow. On the battlefield, he acted recklessly, not seeming to care whether he lived or died. Hecro, meanwhile, learned that while Red Willow Woman was everything a wife should be, and their lodge was always neat and orderly, her heart and mind seemed to be elsewhere. The following spring, a daughter was born, but that only seemed to divert Red Willow Woman's attention even more. To cover his disappointment, Hecro rode out often to hunt, and accepted every invitation to take to the warpath. Time passed. Many winters came and went. White Lance and Red Willow Woman saw each other once every 4 seasons at the summer gatherings. Both of them knew that everyone was watching and acted with the utmost propriety, though it was plain to anyone who knew of their situation before that nothing, not even time, could weaken what they truly felt in their hearts. In time, White Lance took a wife, Good Medicine, the widow of a friend killed during a buffalo hunt. He became father to her son, but she understood that while he was a good provider and a dutiful husband, his heart would always belong to another. More winters passed, and White Lance won many war honors, and many men rode with him when he led. He was sought after as a man who gave wise counsel, and he became a leader in peace as well as war. But many, including Good Medicine, saw that he was alone often. In those moments, he was seen to be staring off as if into another time or another place. Like every good Lakota mother, Red Willow Woman was devoted to her children, for now she had a son as well. But she too whiled away many quiet moments staring off to the north, especially during summer evenings. White Lance and Red Willow Woman seemed to live for the summer gatherings, when they would have a chance to talk for a few moments. Each asked politely after the other's welfare and how it was with their families. But in their eyes, a light would shine, and they both seemed to come alive. Neither White Lance nor Red Willow Woman dishonored their marriages or acted contrary to what was expected of them. The price of honor was to give up true happiness, and each had paid the price with heartbreak. But He Crow and Good Medicine had paid a price as well. It had not been easy for either of them. During one summer gathering, He Crow sent word to Good Medicine. They met secretly and talked. That autumn, long after the summer gathering ended, and when the villages had finished their buffalo hunts to make meat for the winter, Good Medicine asked White Lance to take her to visit her relatives who were encamped to the south. Likewise, He Crow announced his plans to visit relatives to the north and invited Red Willow Woman to accompany him. The morning after the first night of the new moon, both couples left their villages. They traveled alone because all their children were now grown. After several days, White Lance and Good Medicine arrived at a certain place near the Smoking Earth River, a place where hunters often camped along Horse Creek. Good Medicine said she wanted to camp there for a few days. He Crow and Red Willow Woman arrived a day later. It was awkward, but the couples were happy to see one another. Near the end of that first evening, as cool breezes crawled along from the northwest, warning of a hard winter coming, He Crow did a strange thing. As they all sat in the light of a crackling fire, he tossed a stick to the ground and spoke to Red Willow Woman. "That stick is you," he said. "I cast you away. You know that in our ways a Lakota husband can cast away his wife by doing so. I have my reasons for this, and now you are away from me. You are free to go where you choose." Red Willow Woman was stunned. Before she could speak, Good Medicine also did a strange thing. She brought White Lance's belongings out of her lodge and placed them on the ground near the door. "I give you your things," she said to White Lance. "There is no longer a place for them in my lodge. You know this to be a Lakota woman's right, to cast out her husband in this manner. I have my reasons. You are free to go where you choose." White Lance was stunned. After a moment, he and Red Willow Woman understood what was happening. "You are the man in her heart," said He Crow to White Lance. "You should be the man in her life, and you shall be. And you are the woman in his heart," Good Medicine said to Red Willow Woman. "Take your rightful place with him, as you should have been allowed to do long ago. You have both done your duty. Now you must follow your hearts." The next morning, Good Medicine took down her lodge, and He Crow promised to see her safely to her relatives. That night, White Lance and Red Willow Woman came together as man and wife, 25 winters after they first met. They lingered in the valley of the Smoking Earth River for days, walking along the river, even as the last leaves of autumn floated to the earth. The whole world seemed new to them. The sky never looked so blue, and the call of the high-flying geese no longer sounded like a sad song. Like the sun chasing away shadows, every new moment together chased off the memories of what should have been. Their hearts soared like hawks on the winds. The first cold gusts of winter chased them to the sheltering gullies near the great muddy river. There they pitched their lodge, and White Lance hunted, so they could make meat for their journey to Swift Bear's village, many long days to the northwest. One afternoon he returned from the hunt to find the lodge empty, the ashes in the fire pit cold. Red Willow Woman was nowhere to be seen, and her horse was gone too. With a little daylight left for tracking, a worried White Lance grabbed his weapons and set out. It was not long before he found her footprints over a set of hoof prints. From the tracks it was plain that Red Willow Woman was trailing her horse. Snow began to fall, lightly at first, as he followed their tracks. As the afternoon wore on, the snow became thicker and thicker. Soon White Lance could no longer see any tracks. He began to call out her name, shouting over and over again. Daylight was fading. He knew it was nearly sundown. The snow covered the ground and hid the sky. There was nothing but whiteness. Then he heard a faint cry, a voice carried by the wind. White Lance ran toward the sound, and soon dark shapes appeared out of the whiteness, and his heart pounded like a fast drum. One of them was Red Willow Woman, huddled on the ground, the snow beneath her red with blood. Over her stood an angry and powerful bear with blood on his claws, roaring as it turned to face White Lance. As a cry of anguish and rage like an angry summer thunderstorm rose from his chest, White Lance ran and thrust his lance. It went true and pierced the animal's great chest, but the beast was powerful and he fought back. Its sharp claws slashed and slashed until White Lance was covered in his own blood. But he stabbed with the lance again and again, piercing the bear's chest each time. The snow turned red with their blood, and the cold air was filled with their bellows of rage and pain. They fell, almost at the same heartbeat. The great bear finally weakened by a final thrust of the lance deep into his heart. But he had ripped open the throat of his killer. With the last remaining heartbeats of life, White Lance crawled to Red Willow Woman and took her in his arms. She summoned her waning strength to pull him close, and so they walked into eternity together as husband and wife. 2 summers were to pass before a group of hunters found the bones near the shore of the great muddy river. 2 skeletons were entangled. Nearby lay the bleached bones of a bear, the point of a lance embedded inside its ribs. It was not difficult for the hunters to imagine what had happened. They also saw 2 cottonwood saplings growing side by side on a grassy slope near the water, as if growing from the same root. Their families placed the bones of White Lance and Red Willow Woman on the same scaffold. As the years passed, the saplings grew into tall, sturdy trees, their upper branches twisting around each other like hands interlocking fingers. As more seasons and years passed, people would come to sit under the 2 cottonwoods, and in their cool shade they told the story of 2 young people, she with dark, beautiful eyes, and he who stood straight and tall. And as the story was told, the breezes rustled the leaves of the 2 cottonwoods until they sounded like 2 gentle voices blending in song, 2 voices that rose as one. Humility. Ushi ichiapi. to be humble, modest, unpretentious. The story of no moccasins. Among us, the old ones are the best models for how we should live our lives. Every old person is a collection of stories because of all that each one has seen and lived, and all that happens in the world around them in a lifetime. I have not met an old person yet who was not a strong exemplar of at least one virtue, and many are outstanding examples of more than one. Such a person was an old woman named No Moccosins. She lived in a time before the coming of the horses, prior to 1700. No Moccosins and her husband Three Horns had lived long lives. They had a son and a daughter and several grandchildren. No Moccosins, in fact, was grandmother to all the children in the village. She was a small woman, and by her 67th winter her hair was the color of new-fallen snow. The lines in her face seemed to show the many trails she had walked in her life. No visitor to her modest but orderly lodge ever left hungry, and rarely without a gift in hand, something that was finely quilled. She was known far and wide for her intricate quilling patterns and designs, and many women came to learn her skill. But in spite of all of that, she was known mainly as the wife of Three Horns. Three Horns was a man of excellent reputation. He had been a warrior far past the time when most men lost the strength of arm and leg, as well as the will to take risks. So in his lifetime, he had collected many war honors. The lance to which his eagle feathers were tied was twice as long as a man was tall. Every feather was an honor, of course, and no other man could boast of such a thing. When he finally turned from the warpath, he took his place on a council of elders. There he offered his wisdom unselfishly, and the skill with which he spoke could not be matched. He was 70 winters old, but his appearance could take the breath away. He didn't have the big belly that many old men did. He stood straight and tall, and his hair, which hung to his waist, was silvery white. In the village, everyone turned to Three Horns for advice. It seemed as though he had always been there. So when he fell ill and took to his deathbed, the entire village was in disbelief. Word traveled fast, and soon many people from other villages came to pay honor to the dying leader. Three Horns' tiny village grew to twice its size in a matter of days. No Moccosins, her daughter, and several other women were kept busy cooking to feed all the guests. When Three Horns was told about all the people who had come, he asked the oldest people in the gathering to come to his lodge. The 4 men and 2 women who came to No Moccosins and Three Horns' lodge saw in the man's half of the lodge, which was to the north, the long eagle feather staff, bows and arrows and lances, and buffalo hide shields that were the colorful symbols of the glorious life of a warrior. Three Horns, weak from his illness, spoke in a low voice with No Moccosins, who was sitting beside him. But he seemed to grow stronger as he went on. No Moccosins, as she had always done, saw to the comfort of her guests and her husband, and remained respectfully quiet. "My friends and relatives," he began, "thank you for coming into our lodge. I have been honored to share this lodge with my wife for nearly 50 winters. In that time, we were given a fine son and a fine daughter, and many grandchildren. Our people saw difficulty as well as good. We took to the path of war now and then, when good men were hurt or died. We are feared and respected by our enemies. The number of our lodges and villages has grown in that time. We are strong people. Our ways are good. I am thankful to the Great Mystery for bringing me into this world as a Lakota. I have lived a good life, and I am ready for the next." Before I leave, I have a story to tell. And I ask that after the sun comes up tomorrow, you tell this same story to all the people gathered here. That is why I have asked you to come today. Here is what I want you to know. When I was a young man, I traveled south from my mother and father's village to hunt. I came to a village that was encamped for the summer just north of the running water river. There was great feasting and dancing at that time, for there had been a fight and a great victory over enemies to the south. I was invited to join the celebration. It was a good time. There was much food, and we danced far into the night. I awoke the next morning beside the trail to the water and looked into the largest and most wonderful eyes I had ever seen. A young woman was gazing down at me. She said, "It is funny what suddenly grows beside this trail." I jumped to my feet and followed her to the water and carried the water skins back to the village for her. That was the best chore I have ever done in my life. The next evening, I stood in line outside the lodge of this young woman, with all the other young men who had come to court her. Her name was Carries the Fire, and she did put the fire in my heart. I was very surprised when she asked me to come again the next evening. You will not be surprised when I tell you I remained in her village until the autumn hunts. By then, for reasons I still cannot understand, but for which I am grateful, she had decided that I might be a good husband. So I went back north to tell my family so they could prepare the gifts to her family for the bride price. We were married the following spring. In between was the longest winter of my life. So I left my family and became a part of her village, as is a custom among us. Not long after that, enemies came among us from the south on a revenge raid for the defeat they had suffered before. They killed a man and took 2 young women. A war party went south. On their trail, I went along. We trailed them for half a moon, it seemed, going far into country I had never seen. We traveled fast and caught up with them as they rejoined their village. We hid and watched. We saw where they had put the 2 young women. Later, we saw where the night sentinels were and made a plan. There were 6 of us. That night, 2 of us would set a fire to the east of the village, and 2 of us would do the same to the west. While the men of the village were busy putting out the fires, 2 of us would sneak in and take back our young women. The plan worked, except for one thing. I was one of the 2 who sneaked into the village, and I was captured. By dawn, all of our war party had escaped back to the north with the 2 young women, and I was glad to pay the price of a good raid. As you might think, my captors were very angry. They made me a slave. All my clothing was taken from me, everything. I was led around naked. Everyone laughed. I was made to work. I pulled drag poles like a dog until my hands and knees were bleeding. They teased me. They threw dirt in my face. Women pulled up their dresses in front of me and laughed, showing me that I was no longer a man. They gave me no food, so I had to fight with the dogs for scraps. At night they bound me hand and foot and stretched me between 2 stout poles. There was no way to escape. I began to feel lower than a dung beetle. I lost count of the days, but I looked for ways to escape. But lack of food made me very weak, and I knew that before I was too weak, I had to escape. After a time, They stopped putting a guard to sit and watch me at night. Night after night I pulled at the poles which held me, and little by little I loosened them. But someone saw what I had done and pounded the poles in deeper. I was discouraged. I'm not ashamed to tell you that one night I prayed to the great mystery to give me a quick death. I could not escape. I was too weak. One night it was cold and rainy, and I was naked and shivering. There was no one about. It was too cold. Even the dogs curled up out of the rain. My heart was sad as I thought about my young wife, and that I would never, ever see her again. I thought about her so much that her face appeared to me. After a moment I realized it was real. She was there. While I lay there in disbelief, she cut my bonds with her knife, pulled me to my feet, and guided me out of the enemy's village. I was weak from hunger, and my mind was not clear. But I know we walked through the night, and by dawn we arrived at a hiding place she had prepared. The rain had fallen through the night and washed out our tracks. She could not have found a better time to come. She had hidden food and weapons. As my mind cleared, I saw that she was wearing men's clothes, mine, to disguise herself for the journey. We hid, and we ate and rested. She told me that the other men had returned home with the news that I had been killed. She grieved for a time, she said, but she found herself not believing I was really dead. One night she made preparations and left the camp. The others had told her where the enemy camp was located. She knew where to look. After many days of hiding and watching, she came into the camp on that rainy night. Though our tracks were washed out by the rain, the enemy knew we had to travel north to come home. So they sent out a war party. After a few days of resting and hiding, we were eager to start home. We knew to be cautious, of course, and we looked often at our back trail. That is how we saw others heading in the same direction, 6 of them moving fast. I knew they had to be from the village where I had been a captive, and that those 6 men were the best of their warriors. I had escaped when they were certain I could not. They could not know that I had help. Because my escape was an insult they could not let pass. They sent out their best trackers, their fiercest warriors. We covered our trail as best we could, but it did not matter. They were running, and I could not. Carries the Fire and I decided that we should hide, so that we would not leave a trail they could find. But they had to be thrown off somehow. I thought about that, but I could do nothing. So I did not speak that thought to her, but she had thought the same. We made a good hiding place in an old bear's den. That afternoon, while I slept, she slipped away. She returned that evening, wet and barefoot. She had placed her moccasins near a creek to lay a false trail for our pursuers. Later, she told me that when they had nearly spotted her, she hid in a beaver's lodge. She had to go into the creek and come up inside the beaver's house. I teased her, saying that she should have a new name, No Moccosins. After 2 days, we left our hiding place and struck out west and traveled in that direction for 3 days, then north. I began to call her No Moccosins because it was a name of honor for what she had done. That is why my wife is called No Moccosins. Though I grew stronger each day, it was not an easy journey home. We had to watch for enemies, find food and a shelter each night. But it was her quiet courage, more than anything, that was our greatest strength. The people were surprised to see us. They believed that I had been killed and that my wife had gone off and killed herself. That is not unknown. My wife did not want me to tell our story and would only let me say that I had escaped from my captors. The people honored me for that, but it was not my victory. I have asked you, old ones, to our lodge to witness for me. It is time to repay the great debt I owe my wife. Throughout my life, I was fortunate as a warrior, and somehow I was able to win some honors and gain a reputation. Yet all those honors are not mine, because I could not have achieved them if my wife had not risked her life. I have not heard of any man in my lifetime who has done a braver deed. She traveled alone into enemy country and sneaked into an enemy's village. Few men can say they have done that. Because of her deed, I took to the warpath each time with one thought in mind: to be worthy of my wife. For my life long, I have tried to be worthy, but I'm afraid I am not. So I must give all these honors to the one who truly deserves them. I give them to my wife. I ask that my warrior weapons and my eagle feather staff be moved from the man's place in our lodge to the woman's place, where they should rightfully be. I will leave this world soon, and I ask that another thing be done. I ask that my burial scaffold hold only my body wrapped in my burial robe. I will leave this world as the man I was before I met my wife, poor and unadorned. All that I appeared to be would not have been if not for this woman. Three Horns sighed deeply and settled back. No Moccosins silently wiped away her tears and pulled a robe up over her husband. I have known good people in my life, Three Horns continued. Many were wise, honorable, generous, and brave, but none, except this old woman who sits beside me as always, had the one strength that gives true meaning to all the others: humility. She did a brave thing, and no one, not the strongest warrior among us, has yet to do the same. Yet she cared not if anyone ever knew. It is time that everyone knows. Thus, I have spoken. The old ones who gathered with Three Horns gave their word to tell a story of no Moccosins' courage and humility. Through the days and nights that followed, young and old alike crowded around the campfires to listen to those old ones. Before long, no Moccosins' name rose with the smoke from many campfires. Days later, Three Horns died in the arms of his beloved No Moccosins. Though her loss was great, she comforted others. As he wished, Three Horns' burial scaffold was unadorned. Those who mourned for him also honored his widow. No Moccosins cut her hair short in mourning, but nothing else outwardly changed. She lived her life the same as always, a small, quiet old woman amidst the bustle of a busy village. She gave her husband's eagle feather staff, his shield, and his weapons to the Kit Fox Warrior Society. They, in turn, decided to hang those symbols of honor in the great council lodge in the very center of the village. There, they would remain as a reminder of one man's courage and an old woman's humility. The honor and reverence that Three Horns was given in his life now belonged to No Moccosins. Not a day went by that a gift of food was not left outside her lodge door, and every day she shared those gifts with the very young and the very old. For the rest of her days, No Moccosins wanted for nothing. In the winter, the firewood piled outside her door was nearly as high as the lodge. This, too, she shared. She welcomed all who came to visit, and many who did were warriors from near and far. They came to bring gifts and to share a meal, and to sit in the presence of courage to learn humility. No Moccosins died in her 70th winter. On her burial scaffold were hung her husband's shield, his weapons, and the eagle feather staff. On the ground below were piled hundreds of moccasins, so she would not have to journey to the other side in bare feet.
Keep going. A young man asked his Lakota grandfather what the answer was to life's difficulties. Kihela kayo, said the old man, keep going. And then he said, there are many realities in life, such as joy and sadness, winning and losing, standing and falling, plenty and hunger, and good and bad. But the ultimate reality is that life is a journey, and sometimes we walk it in sunlight, and sometimes in shadow. None of us asked to be born, but we are here, and we must walk our journey with our strengths and our weaknesses. Within each of us is the will to win, as well as the willingness to lose. Or to put it another way, the determination to face life, or the fear to turn away from it. Life is not always easy. There are difficulties, storms, if you will, that bring loss, setbacks, sadness, heartache, and disappointments of every kind. But every storm, every difficulty can also teach us to be strong. To learn to be strong, we must stand and face the storms and difficulties that life throws at us. It means crying when we need to, but it also means to keep looking for answers, to keep hoping. It means to survive this moment, and the next, and the next, until the darkness passes and the sun rises again, as it always will. Life's journey is like climbing a hill. To reach the top, we must do it one step at a time. We should always remember that the smallest or weakest or slowest step toward the sunrise, toward hope, toward the top of the hill, is stronger than any storm or difficulty. And we should never forget that the secret to determination is to keep going, no matter how weary we may be, or no matter what faces us. Above all, we must keep going.
Moths and other sacred wings, butterflies and bees whisper. In breath of the wind, blessed ways, blessing way things. Dreams are the mind's streams, thought pictures of the spirit. There are dreams of the day, there are dreams of night. Thinking and dreaming are related. Dreams of the day we make our own. Dreams of night, part of eternal stone. There are dream takers taking from dream worlds, taking dreams as a way of stealing thoughts, turning minds inside then out. Dream slavers want to change our connections to ourselves, mess with our dreams, make us unsure, unclear about right and wrong, feed our dreams and instincts to industrial profit machine. Difference between dream and fantasy, reality and illusion, center and no center. Dreams of the day keep our spirit alive, our creative mind, who we really are. With dreams we can create and heal, follow our original purpose. Dreams are protection, good medicine, blessed way things. Sun and moon continue. We are all on one journey.